Hi, I'm Candice Malcolm, and welcome to the Candice Malcolm Show. We have a great episode for you today. I'm so excited. I have a bunch of things to announce. As you may have seen on social media, as you may have seen in our emails, I'm launching a new media company. So many of you have followed our journey all along. I started True North 9 years ago in my living room. It has grown into an incredible fact-based independent news company, media company that really is changing the media landscape. Well, I am teaming up today with Cian Bexte, who is the founder of the Counter Signal, a fantastic independent journalist from Calgary, Alberta. I just absolutely love his fearless brand of journalism. We're teaming up today to announce Juno News. So Juno News will be a hub and a platform where you can find all of True North's reporting and all of the news, plus Cian Bexte's brand and his own journalism, plus documentaries, podcasts, videos. We have so much for you. So head on over to junonews.com, subscribe, and if you subscribe, you get exclusive access to the interview that I conducted with Pierre Poilievre. I'm going to tell you all about the behind the scenes behind that interview. I'm going to share with you exclusive clips, and then at 7 p.m. tonight, we are going to air the full interview for subscribers over at junonews.com. So make sure you go check that out. I really want you to see the interview. It was great. I got to sit down with Pierre, asked him a wide range of issues and topics. We discussed so many things from immigration to crime. We talked about inflation. We talked about Trudeau. We talked about the election. We talked about a lot of things. So you're really going to want to check that out. So I want to tell you a little bit about the interview because it almost didn't happen. I had been kind of talking behind the scenes with Pierre Poilievre's team and the OLO, the Opposition Leader's Office, and we decided to confirm the interview. We chose Wednesday. We decided that that was when it was going to happen. And basically, we were about to fly out, and all of a sudden, anyone who's in Ontario right now knows that we are facing severe winter weather right now. It was a very cold day in Ottawa, and there was sort of like a pending blizzard that was supposed to roll through and completely shut down the airports and everything. And so my husband and I were flying out in the morning to get to Ottawa for the interview. Didn't even know if the plane was going to take off, what was going to happen. Fortunately, we got there, landed, got into a car, rushed downtown to the Conservative Party's headquarters, and I got to go in there, made it just in time to sit down with Pierre. He's such a nice guy, very gracious, gave us lots of time. There were no parameters or restrictions around the interview. I got to ask any questions that I wanted. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed my conversation with him. He surprised me with some of his answers, but really just solid stuff. And I really want you to be able to watch that full interview. So like I said, 7 p.m. tonight. You have to subscribe though. Go to Juno News and subscribe. I'll give you a little teaser of what the interview looks like. So here is one of my favorite exchanges of the interview when we were talking about illegal immigration and what Mr. Poilievre would do to crack down on illegal immigration.
One of the other things that's happening in the States right now in the new administration is that President Trump has been serious about deportations. And a couple weeks ago, we had Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that if he were the Canadians, he'd be concerned that a lot of the bad people that are in the United States right now might try to sneak up into Canada. This happened last time Trump was president, Mr. Trump was president, where we had people crossing illegally through Roxham Road, thousands and thousands and thousands, and it was disgraceful. I went there myself, Pierre, and I couldn't believe it. You had CBSA officers acting like bellhops, lifting their suitcases, putting them into buses, taking them to Toronto or Montreal, their choice. They got to choose where they would go. So we were sort of facilitating illegal entry into our country. I believe Roxham Road has been closed, but I'm sure that happens in other places. I'm wondering, what would you do to stop bad people that are about to be deported from the United States from just walking across into Canada?
Well, they closed Roxham Road 30 days after I issued an ultimatum to Justin Trudeau that he had to close it, or that we would move a non-confidence. And so he actually met my ultimatum and closed it, which proved that what they had been saying before was all a lie. They claimed they had no way of closing it. Well, of course they had a way of closing it. They didn't want to. We're a nation with borders, and we have the ability to seal our borders against illegal crossers and to block people from coming in. And those that get onto our soil, what you need to do is just do a last in, first out refugee review of their claim. And this is how it works. If you're the last person into the country, then you immediately have your claim heard, which means that within a couple of weeks, if your claim is false, you're sent back. What that does is it sends the signal to everyone who might come in the future, that they're going to be sent home automatically. The problem right now is that if someone gets in illegally, they then, and even if they're not a real refugee, they're not fleeing danger, they have 7 or 8 years of appeals, during which we're paying for hotels and lawyers and food.
And healthcare above and beyond what Canadians get.
Above and beyond what Canadians get. So that then attracts more people to say, oh, hey, if I get to Canada, even though I'm not a real refugee, I can get into the country and I'll be bounced around in the system at someone else's expense forever. If we solve that problem, the message would go out very quickly that Canada's not a place you come to make a false or fraudulent claim. And I believe you would see a very real reduction in the number of people who even try to come. I have a lot of sympathy for real refugees. My wife is a refugee. This has been a wonderful refuge for people who genuinely have claims, and that still will be the case when I'm Prime Minister. But we can't take in fraudulent, fake claimants and pay their bills for 7 years while they work the system.
So there it was, and again, we're going to release the entire interview tonight at 7 p.m. on our website, junonews.com. Head on over there, subscribe, so you can make sure that you get access and you can watch that entire interview. Okay, folks, let's get to the news today, because there is quite a bit to get to today. I want to talk about the premiers. So the Canadian premiers all went down to Washington, D.C. They're all trying to negotiate, trying to figure out what is happening with the tariffs, trying to make some inroads with the Trump administration. Kind of a little too late, guys, but at least they're finally there doing what Danielle Smith did from day one, which is just have some FaceTime, have some one-on-one time, get to know people, try to figure out what is exactly going on behind these threats. How can we negotiate a better deal? How can we secure a better life for everybody in North America? We all want the same stuff here. We all want secure borders. We all want safe streets. We all want to get drugs off our streets. We don't want criminals. We don't want terrorists. We don't want illegal immigrants. We all agree, and we all want a strong economy. We want mutually beneficial things. So let's go down and talk about it. This is something that came out of it that I just think is so embarrassing. Okay, so first you had Doug Ford, Ontario Premier. He's in the middle of the election. He's striking a good tone. A lot of people I talk to around Ontario, they might not like Doug Ford that much. They might not like the Conservative government that much, but they like the way that he's approaching the situation, his tone and his ideas. And so graciously, he was asked, who in the White House did you meet with? Who were you meeting with? And he politely said, I'm not at liberty to say, but we had some productive meetings. And I think that's the way to go. You don't go out and name people's names and expose what the conversations were like when you're in the middle of a negotiation. So Doug Ford kind of playing it smart. And then on the other hand, you have the BC Premier David Eby, who came right out and just said everything. So here we have Global News reporting that BC Premier David Eby says the premiers had a frank conversation with the Trump administration officials about the 51st state comment and stressed it's a non-starter. Eby says that the two representatives that they met with, and then he names them, Deputy Chief of Staff James Blair and Director of Presidential Personnel Sergio Gore, agreed to share a few items with Trump. 1, the willingness to engage. 2, work on key areas of agreement, and 3, that Canada would never be the 51st state. Well, I think David Eby was speaking out of terms, because James Blair himself, the person who he met with, commented and replied to this on X. He said, it was pleasant to meet with the premiers. To be clear, we never agreed that Canada would not be the 51st state. We only agreed to share Premier Eby's comments. Further, we said the best way to understand President Trump's position is to take what he says at face value. Unbelievable, folks. Unbelievable. So because David Eby was out there speaking out of turn, because he volunteered the information to the media that the 51st state comment is off the table, well, that obviously annoyed the Trump administration. That obviously annoyed Mr. Blair. So what did he do? He doubled down, because this is what we're doing. We're in the middle of a negotiation. You have the Canadians speaking out of turn, saying that they agreed to something that the Americans said, no, that's one of our main negotiating sticks. This is a stalking horse, folks. This is what the Americans are threatening Canada with so that they can get a better trade deal. And by Canada saying, no, this is off the table, it's not going to happen, it's just making the Americans double down. This is just bad negotiation tactics. Again, everybody should go out and read The Art of the Deal, okay? Donald Trump has let us know for years. He published this book like 30 years ago. We know how he negotiates a deal. We know his strategy. This is just one of his tactics. And now that he's president, he's using it. And so is his administration. So to have the BC Premier come out and do this, it was a gaffe. It was a faux pas. It was embarrassing. It doesn't help the negotiation. Again, I think that Premier Ford is taking the right approach. Okay, well, we got some further clarity. We had another speech. So Justin Trudeau is gallivanting around Europe. You know, guys, this is so frustrating. So frustrating, folks. We have a crisis in Canada, right? We are facing impending doom with a tariff threat from the U.S. administration, okay? And what is our Prime Minister doing? Gallivanting across Europe, going from city to city, engaging in the kind of international development stuff that he prefers, frankly, than rolling up his sleeves and doing the hard work. We don't have parliament. We don't have government in session. And then here we have Prime Minister Justin Trudeau trying to stir the pot, trying to gain favor for his Liberal Party, get more people. You know, the more people are afraid of the Americans, the better that the Liberals are doing in the polls. So here's Trudeau speaking at a press conference in Brussels, Belgium. Justin Trudeau told reporters, again, he said this in the past, he says, there's not a snowball's hell in chance that Canada will ever be the 51st state. And he added, at the same time, we have to take seriously what President Trump says. Let's play that clip.
There's not a snowball's chance in hell that Canada will ever be the 51st state. At the same time, from having worked with President Trump for close over 8 years now, I can tell you that we have to take seriously what he says and make sure we're responding appropriately.
So after initially not taking the comments by Trump very seriously, remember that Trudeau sort of laughed it off at the beginning, which I think is actually the right approach. I talked to Preston Manning and he agreed. He thinks that this was all initially meant as a joke to kind of ruse Trudeau and tease Trudeau, and that it's really the Laurentians and the media that are blowing things out of proportion, making it seem like it's a real threat that Canada is about to get annexed any minute. Well, Stephen Harper, the former Conservative Prime Minister, jumped in and shared serious concern. So Stephen Harper was speaking on Tuesday in Ottawa at a launch party for his book, Flags of Canada. And there he said that U.S. President Donald Trump's annexation threats should be met with unwavering determination to preserve this country's independence at any cost. He said that Canada should accept any level of damage to fight back against Donald Trump. So it seems like former Prime Minister Stephen Harper really takes this threat literally. And he does think that Trump is trying to take over Canada, that it is a serious, literal threat, that we should be willing to accept any level of damage. I don't agree with that, folks. I think that, again, this is all part of the negotiation. And look at what Danielle Smith had to say in Washington, D.C. She says that she thinks that they're making inroads and that things are going well. So the people who are on the ground talking to American officials and Republican insiders in Washington, someone like Danielle Smith, says, like, let's not lose our minds over this. Let's keep calm and negotiate a deal. Here is what Danielle Smith had to say.
I think diplomacy is working. I think that the fact that we got a 30-day reprieve was because we agreed to work on the cross-border problem of fentanyl. I was pleased to see the federal government announced a fentanyl czar, and my administration has already been in touch with him to talk about how in Alberta we can lend to the success of those efforts. So what I would say is what I've seen from this president is that he is prepared to make a deal.
And in other news, Canada has finally appointed a fentanyl czar. So the Trudeau government on Tuesday appointed Kevin Brousseau, his national security advisor, has now become Canada's first fentanyl czar. Brousseau is a former senior officer in the RCMP, rising up the ranks to become Manitoba's deputy commissioner in 2016. He left policing in 2019 to become a senior public servant, serving as the assistant deputy to Transport Canada and then associate deputy for the Department of Fisheries. Speaking to reporters in Washington, D.C., Finance and Intergovernment Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc said that he had spoken to Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, about Canada's new fentanyl czar, adding that he feels confident that they very much have their attention. Here is this clip from Washington.
Howard Lutnick was there. The National Economic Advisor to President Trump was also there. We started the conversation by discussing our shared priorities around border security and the fight against fentanyl. We took stock of the good work that has been done around illegal migration. We spoke about the appointment of our fentanyl czar, who will be in Washington in a few days. I'm confident that we very much have their attention. They made that clear to us, that Canada is very much top of mind for the work that Mr. Lutnick's doing. That was encouraging.
Okay, moving on. So yesterday on the show, I had Cosmin Jurja, a senior reporter and journalist for True North, on the show. We spent the entire episode talking about Mark Carney and how he has not really been vetted. We don't really know much about him. And yet he's basically been selected to become Canada's next prime minister. He will probably be the prime minister sometime in early March after the Liberal leadership vote. Well, I want to show this clip of Mark Carney that's making the rounds. He was in Kelowna, British Columbia. And here's what he tells the crowd. He says that all of the federal powers of the federal government, including the Emergencies Act, should be used against the Americans in this trade war. So first of all, the Liberals are playing this up as a crisis, as an existential threat to Canada, because it's better for their electoral future if Canadians are afraid and worried and fearful and divided. This is the Liberal playbook. They've used it over and over again. And Mark Carney, again, just lets the cat right out of the bag and says, hey, remember when we used those Emergencies Act illegally during the COVID Freedom Convoy to crack down on peaceful protesters? Well, we're going to do that again. We will use the emergency power once again. It's just one crisis, one emergency after the next for these people. And again, Carney showing us a different side of him that you probably won't see in the legacy media. Here is that clip.
And something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need in order to build this economy and take on the Americans.
Now, True North and Juno News may be some of the only outlets in the country delivering the news, telling you the truth, telling you the facts about someone like Mark Carney, who is, again, very unvetted. The media is not looking at him critically. They are not showing Canadians the full picture. They're just giving him this sort of glossy, rosy honeymoon period. Like, look at this fresh new face. He's a smart central banker who's going to come save Canada from those mean, nasty Americans. Well, you deserve to see both sides. Canadians deserve to see both sides, because otherwise Canadians aren't going to know who this man really is. And I'm worried that Canadians will make a colossal mistake in the next election if they don't learn more. And so, again, we've seen this in the polls. I had Hamish Marshall, great pollster, on the show earlier this week to talk about the fact that now that Trudeau is out of the picture, and now that it looks like Mark Carney will be the person running, the election is actually going to be a lot tighter than we initially thought. It's not going to be a shoo-in for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. It's not going to be a cakewalk and an easy majority. So the latest polls to come out, this was in the National Post, a new Leger poll, suggests that a Mark Carney-led Liberal Party could boost Liberal support by 6 points, up to 37%, tying the Tories, tying the Conservatives. Unbelievable. Unbelievable if Canadians let the Liberals get away with what they've done to the country over the last 9 years. I can't say this enough, folks. It is so important that we have independent media, we have an independent news source to hold people accountable, including the legacy media. Hold them accountable, because they are not telling you the full story. They're not telling Canadians the truth. Please, I encourage you to go on over to junonews.com, subscribe to our new company, help us build the future, help us reach more Canadians. The more people we have subscribed, the more resources we have to share, to promote, to produce more content, to put our stories all over the internet, to advertise everywhere. We want to grow this company. We want to make it the biggest independent or even the biggest media company in Canada. We need your help. Please help us build the future. Head on over to junonews.com and please subscribe. Okay, moving on. So this Saturday is Flag Day. Yes, we have a Flag Day in Canada. Is the day where you're supposed to show your pride in the Canadian flag, honor the anniversary of the new flag of Canada. Remember, we used to have the red ensign. It was redone to show that we were more independent from the United Kingdom. We got the maple leaf. That has been our flag for some 60 years now. And this weekend is the day that you're supposed to remember that, fly the flag, show your patriotism. So it's interesting because we have seen a sort of resurgence of patriotism in Canada, a love of country, particularly on the political left, on the liberal side of the aisle recall that during the Freedom Convoy, during the depth of the COVID lockdowns, the Freedom Convoy came out, and one of the rallying points that they had was a Canadian flag. They were fighting for their Canadian values that they felt had been taken away from the Trudeau government, their Canadian freedoms that are enshrined in our charter. They were using the flag as a rallying point to show, hey, look, we're all Canadian, we love this country, and we want our country back. While the left and the Liberals hated that. They hated this idea that this sort of blue-collar group of rowdy Canadians were saying enough of the lockdowns, and that they were using the flag to the point where the left really separated themselves and denounced the flag. And they decided that the Canadian flag was a symbol of hate. It was a symbol of far right, whatever they called us. It was total nonsense, and it was ridiculous. You know, we're talking about years and years of the left demonizing Canadians, telling us that we're racist, telling us that our country is genocidal and that we were built off of oppression, and really saying that they wanted nothing to do with Canada. I was happy for the political right to take over the flag and have that be our symbol, because we still love our country. We still believe in our country. Well, now that we're in this trade war with the Americans and war of words between the Trump administration, more Canadians on the political left and the Liberals are willing to use the flag and trying to take the flag back. Hey, I'll take it. I think that we should all rally around the flag, unite around the flag. And so if you saw, I did an interview with Preston Manning, the former leader of the Reform Party in Canada, and he had this message for Canadians. He said that the best way to root out anti-Canadianism is to fly the flag. Here is what that looked like when he told me on my show last week.
This is anti-Canadianism. Try and root out the anti-Canadianism from our institutions. And one simple practical suggestion I've had to friends is to fly the flag. You know, when you go to the U.S. and go through the Midwestern towns, or even in New England, every 8 or 9 house has one of these American flags on it. You know, the Americans, for all their faults that we continually point out, are basically proud of their own country. And one of the ways they show it is to fly the flag. Well, why don't we fly the flag? Why don't we fly the flag?
And so, hey, I think that a lot of people may have seen our interview and agreed with us, because Pierre Poilievre a couple days later posted this clip on X, similarly encouraging Canadians to go out there, purchase a flag for Flag Day, celebrate the Maple Leaf, celebrate Canada. Here is what that looked like.
This Saturday is, in fact, Flag Day. So I'm encouraging everyone, regardless of your political allegiance, to go out, get yourself a flag, big or small. Put it on a flagpole in front of your home or through your window, or in any other way that you can show our colors. We're very proud of this country. We'll never be the 51st state. We will always be a strong, self-reliant, sovereign country. So let's show that message by raising the flag.
And just because some liberals and some left-wingers on social media are now trying to take the flag back doesn't mean that the actual Liberal Party of Canada has, because they haven't officially celebrated or recognized Flag Day since 2020. Remember that Justin Trudeau lowered the flag to half staff after that fake news hoax of the unmarked grave story came out. He left the flag down at half-mast for months and months. It was a total disgrace. It was so disgraceful for our country to be humiliated that way, with a prime minister who was basically saying that we should have shame. We should feel shame in our country. We shouldn't fly the flag. We shouldn't celebrate being Canadians. That is the wrong approach. I hope the Liberals will reverse that and once again recognize something like Flag Day, but I don't think it's going to happen this year. We have seen some Liberal boosters online, like I said, have a little change of tone when it came to the flag. So I'm going to point one of my favorite examples of hypocritical Liberals out. So this is an individual named Mike Gibbs. He is a big Liberal supporter on X, and he wrote this back in 2022. Okay, so this was 3 years ago. He says, on this Canada Day, I can't help but think perhaps we need a new flag or a refreshed flag, because Canada, and arguably our flag, was tarnished long before the convoy with centuries of blood and genocidal murder of Indigenous nations. We need a reset. We need a new symbol. So that was on July 1st, 2022. Well, the same user, Mike Gibbs, now on February 10th, 2025, had this to say: nothing better than a brand new Canadian flag. We just got it from Canadian Tire. F Trump, F MAGA. And then he also wrote, "You'd think it was Canada Day. I've never seen this many flags up in Ajax before. The resistance to Trump and Canada is growing." All right, pal. You can see his Twitter bio there. Mike Gibbs with the rainbow flag and the Ukraine flag. He, him pronouns. Thanks, bud. Thanks, bud. So this guy is saying that there's a resurgence in the Canada flag after just 3 years ago telling us that it was genocidal. Yeah, I think we're tired of that. I think we see through you and your noise. So rich, so much irony in the fact that it's now liberals telling us to wrap ourselves in the flag when for years they have been the ones demonizing the flag. Okay. I want to show you, earlier I sat down with Keane Bexley. Like I said, we were in Ottawa for the release of the new announcement of Juno News. So excited to bring this to you. We filmed a promo video outside and then we went back inside and recorded this interview. So part of what we want to offer to subscribers of Juno News is sort of an inside, behind the scenes look at journalism. What is it like to be an independent journalist? What is it like to go around the country and tell these stories to Canadians? It was great to have this sort of fireside chat with Keane, who is my co-founder at Juno News. We hope to bring you conversations like this. We're going to offer it to subscribers every month. You're going to get a sit down with Keane and I where we talk about what we're working on, what we're doing, give you a little behind the scenes of what it's like to be an independent journalist in Canada. So here is what that interview looked like. Hi everyone, I'm very pleased to be joined with my co-founder, Keane Bexley. We have come together to start a new media company, as you probably know, called Juno News. And I'm very pleased. We were actually just outside filming and it is freezing cold in Ottawa. So if our noses are a little red and our toes are a little cold, it's because we were outside for like half an hour. It kind of brought back memories of the Freedom Convoy, didn't it?
Frigid cold, the cold that you only get in Ottawa when you're outside trying to capture the moment, and the weather just doesn't cooperate.
Well, we were talking about it because I lived in Edmonton for 4 years. I went to the University of Alberta, and I actually found that it was colder when I lived in Ottawa because in Edmonton, everyone knows that you're going to drive everywhere, right? So you're never really outside for too long. But Ottawa is very much a walking city, so you end up outside a lot, walking from building to building, and it's like a combination of the wind and just the wet cold. It's so cold.
Gets you down to your bones. I can't stand it coming from Calgary. But it's exciting about Juno. I really think that this is going to change the media landscape in the country.
Well, so why don't we, I mean, the point of this conversation today is we want to do a bit more of a fireside chat. We're going to talk about the news, but I also want to sort of unveil the curtains a little and let the audience know a little bit like what it's like to be an independent journalist in Canada, like why we're doing what we're doing. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, Keane, like we talked about it a little bit when you came on my show before, but that footage of you with Justin Trudeau on the beach in Tofino, like it's so incredible to me that you were able to do that and no legacy media journalist was. You know, people that had so many more resources, you know, who they know where Justin Trudeau is, they know what he's doing, but they didn't bother to go and show up there. You've had other opportunities where you've caught up with Trudeau at various places in the country. I think I saw another video of you kind of chasing him out of a meeting somewhere on the East Coast.
Yeah, in New Brunswick.
So like, how do you do it? Like, how do you find him? How do you stake out? Like, tell us what goes into
Well, a lot of
like
it
that.
comes down to, I mean, our viewers at the Counter Signal, they're really well-connected people, and we get tips every day. Oh, I saw the Prime Minister here. Oh, I saw Greta Thunberg here. Oh, all of these examples of citizen journalism that they're doing, that when they send it to us, we're able to take action. Most people don't have the resources to fly across the country and go find Trudeau when he's coming out of an oyster shop. You know, we do though, luckily, and we have the questions to pepper him with when he comes out. So it's a bit of a team effort. It's a mutual relationship with our viewers who constantly, you know, they follow his plane. They track it online and give us live updates of what's going on. And of course our team at the Counter Signal as well. I just couldn't do it without them as well. They are constantly on the ball, finding new events, new locations where we're able to track them down and ask questions. And it's not just Trudeau that we're interested in. It's every single politician in this country, whether they're Conservative, whether they're United Conservative in Alberta, or whether they're a Liberal in Ottawa. We want to hold the people in power accountable because our viewers deserve nothing less.
I feel that way too. So for me, I started in journalism as an opinion writer. I wrote in the Toronto Sun, I wrote an opinion column. And it started out by me writing my opinion about the immigration system. I was really opposed to what Justin Trudeau was doing in 2016 when he first got elected. I thought that the Syrian refugee pledge was dangerous, just given the volatile population over there and the research I was doing into how they were fast tracking it, so people weren't being vetted. They were just rushing people over. It was a total mess. And the more that I wrote about immigration from like an opinion perspective, I started getting so many tips. Like my inbox would just fill up with people inside the government, people who were working on these very programs, who kind of like I was onto something, or MPs, people. I started getting so many tips, even from immigrants themselves. Like I remember once I broke a story about how people who were not citizens were being sent Elections Canada ballots, and it was literally sent to me by someone who was not a citizen, who was like, hey, they're sending me this ballot, and like I'm not even supposed to vote in your country. So it is the amazing thing in journalism that like the more you do, the more comes to you.
Yeah, it's definitely a positive feedback loop.
Yeah,
when it comes to that.
And so much of it comes from the citizen journalists. One of my favorite recent examples was when we had the Elon Musk down there doing Doge in the U.S. and they were uncovering all of the crazy programs that were happening at USAID or USAID, and then all of a sudden the sleuths went in and did the same thing to the Canadian equivalent. And there was a whole thing about whether the website was down, whether they were trying to hide it, whatever happened there. But regardless of that, it was like all of a sudden there were dozens, if not hundreds, of really amazing researchers finding the most ridiculous examples of these government programs and putting them out there. So the media is stacked against sort of free thinking, free speaking people in this country because the Trudeau government funds the legacy media, like they pay for journalism. But I think that there's just such a groundswell of independent voices, independent media. That's why I'm so excited to be in this space, like to launch Juno News, to have this platform. I think it's like we're at the right place at the right time because hopefully there'll be a change of government. I really hope Pierre Poilievre follows through and defunds the CBC like immediately, gets rid of all these other subsidies and programs to journalists, because there'll be a vacuum. Like I imagine that a lot of those companies will disappear and more Canadians will come to trusted independent voices. So that's why I'm excited to be launching this. How do you feel?
Well, what's terrible about the CBC, aside from their just blatant partisanship, is that they're losing ad money, which is like the number one indicator of a failing news site. Ads are how companies should be run, news companies should be run. If you're not getting views on the site, then what's the point of the news company existing in the first place? And the CBC is hemorrhaging ad revenue. They're supported by our tax dollars, and we're supposed to hope that enough people are viewing it that they're sort of able to sustain themselves, but that just hasn't been the case. It hasn't been the case with most mainstream media legacy outlets, and that's why they rely on the journalism subsidy on top of all of the ad contracts that they have with the government of Canada and every other provincial government in the country. That which is, it's reasonable for governments to advertise on these platforms because I was talking to someone about this yesterday. On the counter signal, we have ads with the Alberta government, and the people that view our news, some of them are like morally opposed to viewing anything in the mainstream media, and especially the CBC. But they still have a right to view messaging that is important from the government, whether it's about budget plans or important like announcements that they're making. And the federal government does the same thing with legacy media outlets and even some like smaller media outlets. I don't think they pick and choose favorites there. And I think that that's fine. But there's a difference between that and blatantly subsidizing a media company because it's a media company.
Well, to the point about ads, it's one of those funny things. It's like if the government wants to get to your readers, that's the way to do it. And if you say no to those government ads, they're just going to turn and try to find, they basically give the money to your competitors. So I don't really have a problem with that. But the thing that drives me just absolutely crazy is, the whole premise behind the media bailouts is that the media companies said that there's no business case in Canada, that you cannot make money and run a business and do journalism because Canadians aren't willing to pay for it. Well, part of the reason they're not willing to pay for it is because the CBC gives it away for free, right? The CBC doesn't have a paywall. They don't require subscriptions. So they're doing all of this journalism, giving it away for free, and then they say to their competitors, like, you have to monetize by creating subscriptions and paywalls, but you're competing on an uneven playing field because the CBC has them. But then even for the large newspapers like the Toronto Stars and the Post Media, they say that they need the government bailouts just to exist, so they wouldn't exist without it. But I think that the independent media has again proven that the claim that they're making is false. It's not true. Canadians are willing to pay for journalism. They're willing to pay for news. We're living proof of that, right?
Exactly.
Like, look at the businesses that we've both built. Look at the Rebel. Like, there's so many Canadians that are willing to pay for this, and we all have like successful, thriving businesses because Canadians are so passionate about paying for the news that they're willing to sometimes not even pay for the subscription, but they want to donate and give us an extra $200 to make sure that we're able to get the resources that we need. And so I think the entire premise of what they're saying, what the newspapers and what the Liberals and what the government says, has just been completely falsified by our very existence.
Yeah, it's a 100% false narrative.
Okay, I want to talk about Cosmin Georgia's scoop at True North, but first I just remembered one other question that I wanted to ask you while we're still kind of talking behind the scenes of what it's like to be a journalist. There's a picture on your X page that's a picture of you, Tucker Carlson, Daniel Smith, Conrad Black, and who's the other one?
Jordan Peterson.
Jordan B. Peterson. And I can't imagine 4 bigger, plus yourself, 5 bigger stars in the world of Canadian conservatives. So how did you get that picture?
Yeah, that's so funny. Tucker was in Calgary on a speaking tour, and I was lucky enough to be invited into this room that they were all in, and we just all sort of got together for a quick photo. And I mean, it looks amazing. It's like it was a dream come true. And Tucker is so funny too. He's such a friendly guy. So is Jordan, Dr. Peterson. He is a fantastic person to get to know and chat with. And Conrad Black as well. He's a legend in the industry. So being able to chat with him as well was pretty neat.
Yeah, my only problem whenever I am lucky enough to be in the room with any of those people is how do I even prioritize what I'm going to talk to them about? If I see Jordan Peterson, I have 10 things that I want to ask him about, and it's you have 10 seconds to say something to him.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. Okay, let's get to Cosmin's scoop, because we were talking a little bit about foreign aid. So Cosmin Georgia over at True North Wire broke a story exclusive. Liberal donors, former candidate, lead foreign aid organization that has received $180 million since 2015. Isn't this the way that it always goes with Liberals? Not only are they funding absolutely ridiculous, wasteful programs, but somehow they find a way to make their friends rich in the process.
How much money was it?
$180 million since 2015. And the company includes former Liberal donors, former a CEO who once ran for a Liberal nomination under Justin Trudeau. And so this sort of cozy relationship that exists, I think something like 70% of this organization's budget comes from Global Affairs Canada. It's called CUSO International. Great digging, great research over there at True North by Cosmin Georgia.
Cosmin's great. Every time I see a new scoop, it's coming from him. He's always on top of it. He always has I don't know how he does it. I wish I could have the research skills of that guy, because he, no matter where it is in the world, whether it's in Canada or in Europe, if someone mentions Justin Trudeau in some foreign parliament, he's published on it within 5 minutes of it happening. It's amazing.
Yeah, he's got amazing research skills. I think probably the most read piece, I don't know if it still is, but for a while, the most read piece we ever had on our website was Cosmin put together a map of Canada, and he had geotagged all the locations where churches had been burnt down in the aftermath of the unmarked graves hoax that happened. And this thing was referenced by media companies all over the world. It was really amazing, the initiative that he put together, because we saw that it was happening. All these churches are getting burnt down, and I don't think anyone had put it all together in one location, so you could see it's actually it's not just a few, it's not just a handful. We're talking about, I think it's over 100
it's hundreds,
churches. So honestly, Cosmin is as good as it gets, and again, a good win for independent media that we have him on our side.
This is why I know that this is going to work out well, Juno, because the counter signal, the biggest story that we ever published, it was viewed so much, broke all the records on our site and around the world, was when we published that the 50th church had been burned. Once that happened, that was so shocking to an American audience that it just, it spread like wildfire, to forgive the pun, but it's tragic what has happened in this country. If it was any other religion, this would have been treated almost akin to a genocide, what is going on with churches in this country. And I feel like it is slowed down a little bit, but the legacy of that lie, that there was mass graves in the ground in Kamloops, they were treating it like it was the Holocaust had happened in this country, which is it cheapens the Holocaust, and it's just a lie. There were no mass graves, but and the word is important. They're mass graves. They were treating it like there was piles of bodies of children buried, which of course, if that did happen, that would be outrageous. That would be insane, and nobody, if there was evidence of that happening, we should try to uncover that evidence and expose that injustice, that crime against humanity. That evidence just doesn't exist, and the mainstream media willfully lied and misled the public about that in a way that has damaged the reputation of our country, of the Catholic Church to another extent, and has warped the image of an entire religion in this country and the history of our country among the eyes of the world.
Well, there's so many things I could say, but yeah, I mean, the use of the word mass graves is an intentional. Like when you think when you hear that, you think of the Soviet Union, or you think of the killing fields of Cambodia or something like that. Like we're never talking about mass graves, and the fact that they use that, I think you're right. That was deceptive.
It was repetitive.
It was, and it was demoralizing. I think that was the main thing. Like, it's so rich right now, Kian, to see Justin Trudeau and the Liberals play this like Team Canada, like with the flag and take back the flag and everything. It's like, I'm sorry, you've spent the last 9 years, and specifically since 2021, telling Canadians that they are racist, that their country was built on genocide, that it is shameful to be Canadian, exaggerating things that happened in our past. Look, no one's past is perfect, and I think that Canada made a lot of mistakes with that program. I'm not in favor of residential schools at all, but the reality is they flamed a story, flamed a hoax narrative that Canada had committed genocide, that, I'm sorry, but priests and nuns were out there murdering kids. Like, it was never true. It was outrageous on the surface, and the legacy media didn't challenge it. Instead, they just promoted it and propagated it, and it did take the independent press. I know that there were some strong voices in the legacy media that came around, like Terry Glavin, and he did great work on it, but that was like a year or two after the fact. True North, we were telling these facts and reporting this in real time, and it was tough because nobody wanted to hear it, and people were very upset that we would dare question the narrative, and that's all we were doing at the time, was just asking some simple questions like, what do you mean ground penetrating radar? What does that mean? What does that entail? When is this report going to be released? When can we see it? Like, what have you found? Just kind of basic questions, and poking some holes in the narrative that we saw. And I think it's terrible what Justin Trudeau did to the country, what the media did, because I mean, imagine, like, for any young Canadian growing up, you look at patriotism rates, the number of young Canadians that say that they would move to the United States, it's like half, and it's like, well, do you really blame them? They were raised at a time like telling, like, first of all, there's not the same economic opportunities, but you also live in a country that tells them that there's something wrong with them, that their country is wrong, that it was built off the back of something horrendous. And it's same thing for First Nations children. It's like, imagine being told that narrative and trying to live in that country, being told that you're not ever really going to have a fair shake. The country hates you. They try to commit genocide against you and your people. Like, it's just such a horrible thing that they did, and that is one thing. I honestly think that's one of the worst things that Justin Trudeau did to this country.
A legacy of demoralizing and destroying a generation, making it financially impossible to live, making it almost a crime to love your country and support its history, despite the issues that it had. You made a good point. The residential school system was terrible. I'm the last person that would ever support the idea of a government coming into a family's home and taking kids. That's nuts.
That didn't really happen, though. That's the thing. Like, that's why True North published a book called Grave Error. Tom Flanagan, who's a renowned professor of political science there, he basically makes the point that the program was never compulsory. This idea that they were coming in and swooping and taking kids is greatly exaggerated, and that the numbers, like, it was a voluntary program. Most people actually wanted their kids to go because they wanted their children to have the opportunity to have a free education, and they were top-notch education in many cases. So, I mean, so many of the things that we say and hear about the residential school program, not true. I think broadly speaking,
I would say that it wasn't a good thing for the country. Just, I don't like the government intervening in most cases.
Yeah, like, I'm glad that education is under the provincial jurisdiction. I wouldn't want a federal Department of Education.
yeah, it would be a disaster 9 times out of 10. But yeah, that is Trudeau's legacy, is a legacy of demoralizing a generation, making it financially impossible to live and work in the country. It's become almost a status symbol to have a home now. That wasn't the case 10, 15 years ago. Once you turned 25, you were sort of on your way to, and you had a job and you started a family, you were on your way, you'd have a home. And on top of that, having kids at this point has become a status symbol. It's impossible to afford children in Justin Trudeau's Canada. And I think that's by design. Justin Trudeau doesn't really care if you're struggling to afford groceries, you're not fighting back against the government. That's it, plain and simple.
Well, I hope that, having kids, I think having kids is one of the most important things that people can do.
Yeah.
Like it's really sad to me to see the plummeting birth rate. It's something that we don't talk about nearly enough. It's really an alarming trend among young Canadians. There's not having kids. Millennials aren't having kids. Gen Z aren't having kids. I think the replacement rate is supposed to be 2.1. I think right now we're at like 1.3, which is just like terrifyingly low. And I think you're right. When people are demoralized, when they feel like they can't afford things, they're not going to take that next step in life. I wanted to quickly, just before we wrap it up, the premiers are down in Washington, D.C. right now. We're hearing lots of different things come out of that event. But one of the things that frustrates me is when you have like the federal Minister of International Trade saying supply management is off the table. Like, we're not willing to budge on this basically internal protectionist program that we have, that if you were American, you'd say that's a legitimate concern. So we're saying we're not willing to even talk about supply management of dairy. We would rather have 25% tariffs across the board on everything than worry about upsetting this one special interest group. You made the point that they were willing to sacrifice Alberta oil, right? But they're not willing to sacrifice this arcane, outdated communist program that protects a couple of hundred dairy farmers.
Literally the sacred cow of this country. The oil lobby could learn a few things from the dairy lobby. The dairy lobby is great at what they do because they have positioned themselves as these supporters of small family farms. Like if we didn't have this communist control over our milk and butter system, then family farms would cease to exist. It's like, no, that's not true. If we let American dairy into this country, our farmers, supposedly are great. I think they are. I think that we have great farmers in this country, and they will be able to manage their own supply. They'll be able to manage a high quality product. They'll be able to grow and compete. And who doesn't want American dairy products and more choice in their supermarkets? Who wouldn't want European cheese in their supermarkets? But for some reason, we are not allowed to allow that free market into our country. For what? To protect this massive lobby that has a ton of money to influence politicians. That's how I started my career, was actually exposing the dairy lobby for their manipulative tactics that they used on the Conservative Party and Andrew Scheer when the Conservative Party was considering getting rid of supply management. And they promised their membership, the dairy lobby, that didn't matter what people voted for, they were going to get their way, which I think is sad. But I think that the oil industry should take notes, because the government in Ottawa seemed completely willing to sacrifice the oil and gas industry just over almost nothing. But they won't budge on this when our entire economy is on the line. It's embarrassing.
Well, especially given the reality that we live in, like we have a cost of living crisis. Canadians can't afford groceries at the same rate. I think what is it, 40% use a food bank, or 20%, sorry, have used a food bank, millions and millions of Canadians. It's like, how about we introduce a policy that might lower the prices, add some competition in there? I think you're right that Canadian dairy farmers do a great job and it's a good quality product, but couldn't we all benefit from some more competition? We do live in a free market society, or at least they're
treating our milk like OPEC treats oil. Which is, it's shameful seeing milk go down the drain while food banks are running out of food. People are lining up. There's actually bread lines, and we're dumping milk down the drain to protect an archaic system that should not exist, and gambling our entire economy over this one issue. This is what Donald Trump wants. He wants concessions on things that we should do, even though the Americans, whether the Americans want us to do it or not. It'd be good for Canadians to open up the market and provide more milk to families, so that single moms who have 3 kids and are struggling can put milk in their kids' cereal bowl. I looked at a jug of milk when I was going to the supermarket last week. It was like $8 for 4 liters of milk, and a stick of butter was even more than that. Like, it's outrageous.
It is. It is. And, you know, again, this is kind of like the low-hanging fruit. It shouldn't take an American putting pressure on us from a trade perspective to do the right thing to help Canadians have a more affordable life. I completely agree with you on that one, Wilkie, and I can't tell you how excited I am about our new venture. I think Juno News is going to do fantastic. We have so many plans, so much in store. I hope there's an election, because if there is, we're going to be ready for it. We're going to have boots on the ground covering this election from the beginning to the end, and I think we just have so much in store. So to the audience, thank you so much for your support. Please head on over to junonews.com and subscribe. You can subscribe for $10 a month or $100 for the entire year. Support independent journalism, support what we're doing, help us on our mission. We're trying to rebuild the future. Canadians deserve independent media. They deserve press that aren't bought and paid for by the Trudeau Liberal government. So join Kian and I on that journey. Please go over there and subscribe. Thanks so much, Kian.
Yeah, thanks for having me.